Consuming eggs simply makes no sense at all for anyone concerned about the treatment or slaughter of animals. Quote, organic, end quote, milk. Like humans and all mammals, cows need to be impregnated to produce milk. Quote, organic, end quote, cows are therefore repeatedly impregnated, often on a device called, quote, rape rack, end quote, where they are inseminated, either artificially or by a bull. Cows would normally live about 20 years, but due to the economics of the, quote, organic, end quote, milk industry, they are usually slaughtered after about 5 years, when they lose the ability to generate commercially viable quantities of milk. During this short 5-year life, they are pregnant about 9 months out of every year and give birth to a calf 2 or 3 times. Some of the female calves will end up as dairy cows to eventually replace their mothers and grandmothers. Most of the calves from, quote, organic, end quote, dairy producers, however, are forcibly abducted from their mothers, who often grieve the loss intensely, and sold to the veal industry. Although some, quote, organic, end quote, dairy cows are permitted to graze outside during part of the year, many, quote, organic, end quote, cows never see the light of day until they are transported to slaughter. Just as with, quote, free-range layer hens, end quote, organic dairy cows, end quote, and their calves are transported and slaughtered in the same manner as any other cow or steer. Often they are confined to a tractor-trailer for days of transport, and sometimes through extremely hot or cold weather conditions. Because they are depleted from so much milk production, and from genetics designed to maximize milk output, they are often much weaker than, quote, beef cattle, end quote, when they arrive at slaughter. Indeed, most of the, quote, downers, end quote, cows too sick to walk, are dairy cows, including dairy cows from, quote, organic, end quote, dairies. When they arrive at slaughter, downers are often cruelly prodded with electric prods and or bulldozed into slaughter, as was displayed earlier in the year on national television in undercover films provided by Humane Society of the United States. Actual slaughter can be an unimaginably horrific and terrifying experience. Although the cows and steers are supposed to be, quote, stunned, end quote, with a captive bolt gunshot to the skull, this can be difficult for workers to achieve, especially with the rapid pace at which the animals are moved on the line. This can result in the animals being fully awake when they are shackled, hoisted upside down, and cut at the throat. Because cows and steers who are not properly stunned are sometimes flailing around at the cutting section of the fast-paced line, they occasionally miss the throat cut, or the cut is not sufficient to kill them. Due to production pressure to keep the line moving, these cows and steer will often end up alive at the hide-ripping machine. Commercially viable, quote, organic, end quote, milk production, regardless of the label it is sold under, is extremely cruel to cows and calves and requires mass slaughter. Quote, organic, end quote, dairy cows are physically and psychologically broken by the time they reach the slaughterhouse, which can be an unimaginable horror story in itself. Consuming, quote, organic, end quote, dairy products, milk, cheese, ice cream, cream cheese, sour cream, simply makes no sense for anyone concerned about the treatment or slaughter of animals. The immorality of the institution of animal exploitation. Animal exploitation, because it exploits animals as property, is chattel slavery. Animal exploiters completely own and control animals as property, resources, and commodities, and any, quote, restrictions, end quote, on the behavior of the property owner are solely for the efficient exploitation of animals as commodities. We don't approve of human slavery no matter how, quote, humanely, end quote, or, quote, kindly, end quote, a slave owner treats his or her slaves. We reject the institution of slavery in all its forms because the institution itself is immoral. The institution itself is immoral because it systemically and necessarily reduces its subjects to mere objects existing solely to satisfy the means of others' ends, affords no protection to the exploited beyond what is deemed appropriate for efficient exploitation as a commodity, and necessarily reduces sentient beings with emotional lives, desires, and aversions to mere things, as if they were insentient broccoli, corn, rocks, or trees. The institution of animal exploitation, that is, slavery, is a moral blind spot in our culture, exactly as human slavery was a moral blind spot 160 years ago in America. We need to examine and question our cultural prejudices, just as 19th century Americans needed to examine their cultural prejudices. If we are morally opposed to the institution of animal exploitation, and the cruelty and gross injustice it necessarily entails, as any decent person who is aware of the facts included in this essay ought to be, in brackets, not to mention the facts of other exploitation not included here, in brackets, our moral baseline must be veganism. And there's a note at the end of this essay, and it says, to see more about spent free-range hens, see Peaceful Prairies Sanctuary, and it gives the link there, and you can find other links during this essay, so I will put the link to this essay in the information section. Thanks for listening. As we can clearly see outlined in Dan's essay, all animal use, I repeat, all animal use is abuse, and all animal use in all its forms is immoral, and the only reason it exists and continues today unquestioned by most of society is because, as a society for thousands of years, we have held a deeply shared speciesist ideology that other animals are here for our use and our pleasure. This great slavery, this great holocaust of unimaginable horror, is far, far greater in scale than anything else that has occurred in the history of this planet, and it must end, and it will end. And you can help it end by becoming an abolitionist vegan and educating others to do so. You will find that veganism is the single most important form of social activism you'll ever engage in. Be serious about opposing animal use. I would also like to encourage anyone who is listening to subscribe to Professor Francione's blog, abolitionistapproach.com, and get a hold of a copy of Professor Francione's new book, which will be out in the next couple of months, titled The Animal Rights Debate, Abolition or Regulation. Please come and visit us on facebook.com/livevegan for all things abolitionist vegan. And remember, if you're not vegan, go vegan. It's easy, it's better for you and for the planet, and most importantly, it's the morally right thing to do.